Okay, y'all, it's a brave new world, and we are racing into, I don't know what century it is. We're getting there fast. We have covered a couple of episodes in the past. The last 2 weeks, particularly, has been spotlighting some of the more tactical uses of getting into the human mind and how that can be beneficial from a military standpoint, to the guys on our side, and how it can be disadvantageous for the people that are our opposition if we're able to somehow weaponize those technologies against them. We have with us tonight TMC and Chris Hunter. And if you guys want to send messages back and forth, do it specifically to the person that you're trying to get to. Otherwise, it puts a little pop-up on my screen here. But yeah, I see you there, Chris. Welcome. Glad to have you. TMC, how are you doing tonight, sir?
Very good, Eddie. Thanks for asking.
Good. All right, so that was what we kind of laid down some of the groundwork, and we're continually discovering more each week, each month, each week, each day sometimes. All right, and what the deal is this is a whole evolving thing, and we're racing after all of the information to try to bring it to you and interpret it, translate it for ourselves and for you as well. So with that having been the last couple of weeks, so now we're going to look into something that James Giordano, who was featured both of the last couple of weeks in our episodes, gave allusion to in his lecture that he was doing to people who were in the military and the armed forces regarding nanotechnology and the uses of that. And we're going to dig a little bit deeper into exactly what that is, and nanotech or nanobiotech. All right, so nanotechnology in and of itself solely would be just extremely small particles that you could put anywhere. You could put them out in the yard. You could put them on your dog's fur coat. You could inhale them too. I mean, they can be used for all kinds of things. They're extremely small. They're virtually impossible to filter out with any normal type of media filter that we have. And there have been very talented researchers and people in both industry and institutions who have been working to make very, very tiny particles that can do all sorts of things. I'm going to get into that a little bit tonight. Excuse me. It spans into how it can apply to living organisms, including the human body. And we will illustrate some of these molecules and a little bit of discussion from people that we're going to feature. One of them is Ulrich Kroll. Forgive me if I've pronounced the name slightly off. Another one is Professor Russell Cowburn. And another one is a young lady on TEDx Youth named Katie Liu. And we're gonna go back and forth between these things, and we're going to kind of just weave the whole thing together, and hopefully it'll make a lot of sense to you as we start to familiarize people a little bit more with nanotechnology as it applies to biological organisms. These things. So I'm going to start by playing one of these little videos that I have right here, and bear with me. We've got it ready, and I want to thank you all for being with us. If you're actually watching this show on replay, that's okay too. There a good number of them are up on our channel, and you can go back. It would be advantageous to you actually to go back and review some of the others. They kind of all connect, but it's a little bit of a different feature every week, and they do relate. It is additive information. I'm hearing a slight echo from something, but maybe it's not serious. Okay, so here we go. This is Dr. Ulrich Kroll, and he did a little TEDx talk, and I've taken some segments out of this from him, and we're going to play one of them right now. Here we go.
natural tendency to think nanotechnology. How can somebody operate on the basis of building a technology just in a very small scale? But for most of us, we don't really understand what nanoscale means.
Okay, but we're going to know, and we're going to know in very short order what nanoscale means, especially after I zero this thing in so that the screen looks a little better for you. Let's see here. We're working on it. Okay.
So what I wanted to do is give you a progression in terms of size scales to give you an appreciation of what's going on. We tend to work in sort of the meter scale. You stand about a meter, a little bit higher, if you will. And you can imagine working with a sewing needle. And the eye of that sewing needle is about 1 millimeter in width. And
everybody knows the metric system by now, right? You know, a centimeter is 10 times, it's 10 millimeters are in a centimeter. So millimeter, centimeter, or meter. So a meter being, I believe, something like 3.9 feet. And, you know, you do the fractions from there. And that's what this chart's showing you here right now.
For someone with aged eyes like mine, I'm already having trouble getting that thread through that particular eye of the needle. If you now take that size scale of the eye of the needle and divide it by 10, you're into the width of a hair. And the picture you see here is wool from a sheep. If you take that hair and divide...
Okay, so right here is wool from a sheep. Right here. This was a piece of thread. This is wool from a sheep, or the same width as a human hair. So we don't have to dwell on this too long. You'll get the perspective of it. This stuff, it's like really small. And keep an eye on the number of zeros in front of the 1 as we go down in the scale here.
Divide it by 10 again, you're into the size scale of a cell.
Okay, here we have cells, all right? So we went from the size of a hair, and then we divided by 10, and now we're down to the size of a cell. So if you envision these cells, and if you try to take these and look at them in the scale of what the hair was, you'd have, right where my pointer is, you'd have a whole ton of those cells in a very small part of that hair. And he goes on. Now we're going to go inside the cell, and that's the next 2 panes over here.
And what you see here is a human red blood smear. Now all you have to do is divide that cell by 1,000 times more to get down to the nanoparticle technologies, the nano.
Okay, and there it is. So this gives you a little bit of a fix. This now, you know, our cells, our human cells, some of them are larger, some of them are smaller, but a red blood cell is sort of representative of an average size of a cell. It's on the small side, actually. As you know, if you really put them all up on a chart, you'd see that red blood cells are actually not our larger cells. They're some of the very smaller ones. Why? Because they need to be small enough to flow through all of the little capillaries in our bodies, and those capillaries get very, very, very tiny. So now the size of the particles that are subject of the technology that we're talking about tonight are the size of add 3 zeros more and go that much smaller. And that is what you're seeing right here. One of these things, like this one that's got like a hexagonal shape, that is a nanoparticle right there. So you could have many, many, many of these nanoparticles inside of a human cell. Point made, and there we go. So that's the little blurb on scale. I'm going to go right into the next. You know what I'm going to do? Let me try to make the screen work so that it displays a little bit better for you. And I'm sure that I can do that. If you just give me a couple seconds to do it here. Let's see. Okay, let's try that. Okay, that's a little better. All right. All right. Again, this is Dr. Ulrich Kroll, and he's doing a little bit of a familiarization with nanotechnology as it applies to biological organisms.
Phenomena that are taking place. And what I wanted to do is give you a representation of what that might look like. The first things that is important here is that the nanoparticles, they begin to, at least many types of them, begin to interact with light. They can interact with light to absorb the light. Color on clothing is an absorption of light. You see the complement of whatever was absorbed. These nanoparticles can absorb and interact with light also.
So don't let that slip by you. So now we're painting the picture of having very, very tiny particles, and they can absorb light. They can absorb the energy of light. And that will cause a change in the nanoparticle. And what you're going to find him explain is that this is a change by design. These particles are designed to absorb light for a particular purpose, to change their state for a reason. And in the environment of a living organism, that reason would be to become something that's interactive with the organism. And he's going to illustrate this really. I kind of like the way he illustrated it. Good job, Dr. Kroll. Thank you. Here we go.
And for a moment here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pretend that I'm actually the nanoparticle. And so what I've done is set up a little experiment to be able to give you a sensation as to what might be happening at the nanoparticle level. I am a nanoparticle. I'm many atoms. They're held together by electrons. There are many electrons available. And it's almost like an electron glue holding the whole thing together. And so the electrons are moving around a little bit, and I'm held together by this stuff. But what I'm interested in thinking about now is how light is going to interact with this. And what I've done is brought along my camera, and the idea here will be I've now been struck by light.
Okay, so keep in the back of your mind as we go through this, there is a scale here, which is shocking. He is a nanoparticle, and he is, what was it, 1/10,000th the size of a cell. So, and this is, if you call this man the nanoparticle, this is one of the electrons that's orbiting around one or more of the atoms in his particle, which he is in this case.
In that process, my electron is excited. And the electron, in fact, starts moving away from me. And the point of this little demonstration is for you to realize that the electric field of that electron is no longer just inside the nanoparticle, it's outside. It's surrounding the nanoparticle. I can sense the environment because I've excited one or more electrons in this nanoparticle.
Okay, so the nanoparticle has now got communication outside of its internal atomic structure. And again, we invite you to, well, do a couple of things if you'd like. One is go to humaninternet.org, where TMC has got a whole, a kind of a cornucopia of information of all sorts related to this. But in previous shows, we also covered how various types of energy, we were mostly highlighting electromagnetic energy, but other types of energy as well. Light is a form of electromagnetic energy, and other types which can cause interaction or excitation of molecules. In this case, what we're doing is we're combining that those surveys that we've done in the past of how many sorts of electromagnetic radiation in our environment can interact with our cells and with the structures in our cells. This is an example of such a structure, as this professor has decided to embody a nanoparticle, and this is what's happening, is the state of the nanoparticle is being changed by electromagnetic radiation. He chose to use light in this case. He goes on.
Now, that's interesting, but it's probably something that you will recognize. I'll just point it out to you. You've seen something like this before. If you hold a bar magnet in your hand, you can physically see what it looks like. But you realize there are magnetic field lines that go well beyond the physical object, the bar magnet. You know this, you can take a piece of white paper and sprinkle some iron filings, some iron dust on it. You can see the field lines. So you know the field can extend beyond the physical object. And so here's a picture of a button magnet. This is the magnet that's inside your earphone set. Its pole is facing straight up. It's under a piece of white paper with some iron filings thrown on top. You can see some of the metal is now associated with the magnet in the center. But notice there's a void, an area that has been swept clean of these iron filings. The field of this particular button magnet is present, and you can sense its presence from the standpoint of this particular picture. You have to imagine clean.
And why is the field swept clean right here? because this is the range of the extent of the magnetic field around that magnet. And there are parallels that you can draw to the illustration that he was giving with the nanoparticle and its electron. There is magnetism and electrostatic forces also at play here, but the field extends beyond the object. So by way of analogy, this relates. This is the little button is the magnet right there, but the field from that magnet extends well out beyond. And you know what? With a more powerful magnet, you could have a field that extend even further. But this illustrates the point. And so when we tie together what we're driving at here is the design and construction of particles that are capable of being altered, or maybe make them do a number of different things that we could want them to do inside of a solution or in a cell or in an environment or in a space of any sort. And that's what we're talking about. So this little snippet's almost done.
Of these iron filings. The field of this particular button magnet is present, and you can sense its presence from the standpoint of this particular picture. You have to imagine this now happening at a very small size scale. And so where does that leave us? Well, it leaves us in a situation where we can think about what a cell looks like. Obviously, a schematic cartoon, they're always somewhat.
Notice the scale there, all right? The average cell, this would be the size of an average cell, and that would be the size of a nanoparticle in a cell. And we all know cells are the very, very important building blocks of all life that we find on this planet, including us. So this can start to give you a little bit of appreciation in which investigators, engineers, and research scientists are designing particles that have they've designed them for a purpose. And how many of these could you have inside of a cell? And what could they do in there? Because inside a cell, there are various little organs. There are digestive organs, there are disposal organs, there are storage organs, and by organs, I mean they look like little circles inside the cell. And we don't technically call them organs, we call them organelles. And then one of the larger and more important ones inside the cell is the mitochondrion, which is the energy factory for a cell. And then over and above that, the most important part of a cell of all is its nucleus, where its DNA is contained. That is the code, that's the software that makes the cell do whatever it's supposed to do. And here's a nanoparticle. By way of scale, the nucleus would be, if that dot of the nanoparticle is the size of a pencil point, then next to it, if we equated the size of this to being, a silver dollar, then the size of the nucleus inside that cellular structure would be somewhere about a quarter of the size of a dime relative to a silver dollar. It'd be about what I'm tracing, maybe a little bigger, maybe a half a dime. It'd be about the size of what I'm tracing right there. So this is showing some things that we've illustrated from a different standpoint in other episodes about nanoparticles and how they can be built and designed to create different types of structures, including nanofibers, nanofabrics, and nanotubules. Those would be very, very small in scale inside a cell. And he's almost, this is got a couple seconds left on this thing here. And there's a reason why we're going into all this, because there's the possibilities of this are huge, and we're going to get into it.
Misleading, but at size scale I wanted you to see the sense of how small a nanoparticle is relative to a cell. Clearly we can put many nanoparticles into the cell.
I'm going to go right on to the next clip. Any comments from either of you guys?
Nah, the only thing I have to say is based on the assembly of circuits, that might have thrown people to think that you can put nanotech in a cell or in an organism and actually construct electrical circuits. And if we get that far, I'll show you a patent that specifically discusses exactly that. It's called triggered self-assembly of nanoparticles. And it's the patent was assigned to the University of California and MIT. And in that patent, they talk about using nanotechnology to self-assemble in the body to create electronic circuits.
You said self-assembly. Okay. All right. One other little thing that where did my little scale diagram
Real quick,
go here?
radio check, sound check.
You're good, Chris.
Thank you.
Yes. Hi, Chris.
Hello.
Yep. There's going to be there are going to be opportunities for you to get in on this conversation. We're kind of driving at a certain angle here, but with the disclaimer that everything that we discuss on this show is strictly for entertainment purposes only, and we never intend to incite fear or any form of violence, harassment, fear, or inciting any sort of stress upon anybody. It's just for information. We would like to talk about some of the other ramifications of this, but we got to be careful because we don't want to wind up having our video taken down. So,
What if it's about spiders? I don't like spiders.
Spiders, yeah, spiders are right out, right? We can't
Okay.
talk about spiders.
Thank you.
So segueing back from what TMC was just illustrating, if you envision that a cell is chemical and electrical and thermal, it's all of that stuff, and there are different types of energy operating in a cell. Chemical, thermal, and electrical are the biggies. And if you can envision that self-assembling nanoparticles would be able at this size to create little wires, little conductive fibers that go from one part to another of a cell, the possibilities are really, it's like almost science fiction how far you could go with that. I'm going to go right into playing the next video right away here. And
Particle is relative to a cell. Clearly, we can put many nanoparticles into the cell.
That's for sure. Okay, next clip. This is Dr. Ulrich Krull doing a TEDx at University of Texas, by the way. All of the links for what we're showing here are below our video description, in case you're interested.
Here, we know the nanoparticle can interrogate its environment, but how are we going to get information back from the nanoparticle?
Now this is where at I guess, if you will, at a macroscopic scale, we've discussed this and we've shown you patents of how input-output from of physiological condition from cellular structures can be transmitted or transceived, if you will, back and forth in and out of a body. So he just said it. We know that we can interrogate, the nanoparticle can interrogate the environment. Very cool.
Here, we know the nanoparticle can interrogate its environment, but how are we going to get information back from the nanoparticle? We can't stick a wire through the cell and expect all this to work. Well, the good news is that as much as a nanoparticle can absorb light, a nanoparticle can also emit light. And the question we then need to ask is, well, is there information, chemical information, associated with the emission of light?
Now, if you recall, at TMC, I don't know how many episodes ago it was, but we were talking about different compounds, and they were in aqueous solutions, which had been designed to have a certain absorption characteristic and a certain radiating characteristic. But he's going to get into a neat twist that I didn't know about. Do you remember when we got into that?
We were discussing quantum dots, and we were looking at luminescence, and that's what he's getting at here, is they emit light. And what I want to illustrate, or I guess reinforce with everyone, is that light is just a particular frequency band on the electromagnetic scale, within the electromagnetic spectrum. So when he says light, based on how these things are made, they don't necessarily have to emit blue, green, yellow, red. They can emit infrared. They can emit ultraviolet. They could potentially emit radio waves, millimeter waves, and others. There's nanoparticles that'll emit alpha particles, which, I mean, that puts you up in the gamma radiation range. They use that for cancer treatment, where they'll take a really, really hot particle and they'll encapsulate it, and then they'll put it next to a tumor, and then they'll remotely trigger it, and that will release the alpha particles, because then the hot nanoparticle will be exposed to the localized tissue, and it'll start degrading and going through its half-life process and start emitting alpha particles. Technically, that's an emission of light. Technically, when you look at light as just being another word for electromagnetic energy.
Exactly. Yep.
So,
Yep.
okay.
And I've kind of got a particular angle that I'm driving toward here, which is if we're able to incorporate these nanoparticles into cells, and if we do get to that segment that you want to get to, I hope we can, regarding these things self-assembling, then you could, at least at a small scale, you actually set up sort of a small computing system inside of a cell, and it would be capable of interfacing with the outside environment. And if it's that small, if those nanoparticles and nanotubules are that small, then relative to the size of a DNA molecule, they're really not big, yet they would be able to perform operations on the DNA, shall we say. Snip, splice, duplicate, et cetera, et cetera. And so the possibilities are endless, both good and bad. I mean, there could be some really crazy things, experiments gone haywire. You could cause breaks in DNA that should not happen. Or it could be to spot and correct errors in DNA code that might have been inherited congenitally from your parents, for all we know. It would be possible to edit those things at the nano scale or at the micro scale using nano-sized devices like these.
It's a marrying or a merger or a blending of the synthetic nanotech and the genetic code. The genetic code, the nucleotides, they're in the nanoscale. So you keep your nucleotide count relatively speaking low, and you can assemble genetic code onto or assemble it with synthetic nanotechnology that then works hand in hand. The genetic code may take the nanotech composite, the whole piece of it, may take it to a particular place in the body, may take it to a particular organ, may take it to a particular place within an organ.
Exactly.
And it will know how to do that based on how it's dressed. So it can be dressed with DNA, it can be addressed with RNA, with enzymes, with anything that the body currently understands as relevant. So it could be enzymes, proteases, proteins, it could be anything, and they can attach this stuff.
And even further than into a particular organ, into a particular type of cell within that organ, and into, remember how small these things are, into a particular part of the DNA that's inside that particular type of cell, that's inside that particular type of organ for a purpose, a designated purpose, a targeted operation.
Yeah.
Shall we say.
To your point, it can get into a cell and decide whether it wants to go to the nucleus or a ribosome or the cytoplasm. Or I read today that this stuff can be stored long term and benign, where it's dormant. Basically, it can be stored in the endosomes which exist, and an endosome is basically just genetic code that's encapsulated that the body, or a cell, just wants to deal with it or not deal with, so to speak. It's a storage device, so to speak, an endosome.
Right.
And when that leaves the cell, it becomes an exosome. But what they can do is they can take and store nanotech and or hybrid nanotech, where you have genetic material as well as synthetic nanotechnology at the nanoscale.
Inside of an endosome, which is a small structure. It's an organelle inside of a cell. And it could just be in a packet there waiting for use, right?
For days, weeks, months, or years, it can sit like that.
Yep.
We have a new vocabulary word, nanoscopic.
Nanoscopic.
Yeah. I'm surprised I think you're the first person I heard say that. And I think that word should start to come into common use. So
nanoscopic nanoscopic's there. That's a word.
Oh, it is?
Oh yeah.
All right. First time I heard it.
I just put it in your DM.
Oh, good.
Yeah, it's in the chat.
Yep. Let's see. Oh, I see it. Yes, I do. It's on the side. I can't respond to the chat. You guys know I'm doing my best to watch the chat and respond, but while I have a share up, I can't type. Otherwise, it screws everything up. Anyway,
I'll keep an eye on it.
He's got a few more little points that he's going to hit here, but he's hitting on some really.
These are they're fundamentals. They're
relevant.
Fundamental characteristics of nanotechnology, and in this talk, and our interest as well is what is it doing, particularly in biology.
Yep.
But he's talking about some of the fundamentals, how they, and what he's not really saying is that what he's really discussing are, and some people don't like this term, but these are quantum mechanical principles at this scale, at the nanoscale. You're dealing with what is currently defined as quantum mechanics.
Yep.
So it's quantum sensing. What he's talking about sensing in the body, using nanotech to sense, he's literally talking about quantum sensors. This is sensing technology or sensing platforms at the quantum scale.
And yes, and the terminology that you're bringing to all of us, it is good. I mean, what this is like the most fun you can have on a Saturday night. All right, learn some of this good terminology. He's going to bring up a couple of other terms that I honestly have to just say that I learned a couple things listening to him, and he's going to come up with another one, and he's going to explain what it is. It's called upconverting. He gets to that pretty soon.
Right. A nanoparticle can also emit light. And the question we then need to ask is, well, is there information, chemical information, associated with the emission of light? And my guess is, again, most of you will know this because you've seen something similar before. And that similarity is going to be shown in this picture. If you think of the sun and its spectrum, you've seen it in a rainbow. Most of you know prism will separate out the colors from red to blue. You can actually see that rainbow of colors, but you can do something else. You can look at it in higher magnification. And many laboratories have a picture of the solar spectrum.
To TMC's point, that's what we can see, but the sun is also emitting radio waves, ultraviolet. It's emitting infrared, which we can't see, and violet, beyond the violet that we can see, ultraviolet, and some X-rays, all of the above. So there's a whole spectrum, and we see a slice of that.
But if you walk up and look carefully, you'll see dark lines that cut across the spectrum. And I've given you a picture of what that looks like for a star, not for the sun. What that means is there's certain colors that are missing in the spectrum. They would have had to have been absorbed by something not to be seen. And so when you look at the solar spectrum and you see these dark lines, you're actually detecting the chemistry of the atmosphere of the sun. Chemical.
Did everybody get that? So the sun, let's say that the sun is emitting all of these different wavelengths, and he's going to relate this to a nanoparticle, which you excite with electromagnetic radiation, and then what comes back out of it and from the environment. But if there are colors missing from the spectrum that you see from the sun, then that means they got absorbed by something. And whatever absorbed them has an electromagnetic frequency signature. That signature is it's unique to that particular element, whatever it might be. So those absorb that particular wavelength, and you don't see them because they got captured by that particular type of molecule.
Or chemistry is now removing some of those wavelengths. We know that we can, at a distance, look at the emission of light and interpret chemical information.
I'm going to go right to the next clip. We'll have plenty of other stuff to get into. I'm going to go right to that. Any commentary here, gentlemen?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, I just learned something. The omission of color in his example is the indicator, or is the sensor that something was absorbed or lost in the transmission.
Riddle me this. If you look at a plant, you shine light on a plant, and you see green on the leaves, then does that mean that
all else has been absorbed?
Exactly. What that really means is the leaves of that plant, they have absorbed the other colors. They've absorbed, let's keep it simple, red, green, and blue, let's say. All right. That means the plant has absorbed the blue and it's absorbed the red, but it's reflected the green. So if you want to make a plant not grow, just shine green light on it because it doesn't want it. It'll just keep reflecting it back to you. If you want to make a plant grow, then shine red light on it, which will induce budding, and shine blue light on it, which will induce foliage growth. Or consult your nearest horticulturist for better information than I can give you. Next clip.
Think of taking a cell, shining ultraviolet light at it, and then asking, how is the cell doing? It's not going to be doing very well at all. So we got to go to the other end of the spectrum. We have to go to the red end of the spectrum.
Now, I think I cut the clip off a little bit there, but what he was talking about is now they want to start using a type of light that will be chemically interactive with the cell or electrically, energetically interactive with the cell, but not hurt the cell. Right. And ultraviolet and X-rays are very high energy waves, and those can do a lot of damage to cells. Say again.
That's the delineation between ionizing and non-ionizing radiation. So what he's talking about, ultraviolet hurting cells, it's because you have enough
electron volts,
right?
High enough electron volts
per photon to start displacing electrons in whatever the medium is that you're touching. That the photons are striking.
Yep.
So there's enough energy in one photon above the ultraviolet band in the electromagnetic spectrum to literally start ripping apart matter.
Right. Breaking chemical bonds, blasting molecules apart, all sorts of things.
Oxidation is one of the first things to occur in biologicals.
Yep.
Where you start ripping apart chemical bonds, and the hydrogen and water don't like that very much. Neither do cell membranes. But anyway.
So the fascination continues, where he's got you see what the ground that we've covered so far. Now he's going to take it a little bit further, and he's going to start talking about what kinds of light we want to use in order to have this kind of input-output to our nanoparticles that his associates have designed. Here we go.
Think of taking a cell, shining ultraviolet light at it, and then asking, how is the cell doing? It's not going to be doing very well at all. So we got to go to the other end of the spectrum. We have to go to the red end of the spectrum. Again, I'm going to guess many of you, probably as a kid, tried an experiment where you put your hand over a very bright flashlight, and you could see the outline of the bones through your hand. What color was your hand? It's a reddish color. And most people say, oh, I can see the blood in my hand. Well, guess what? It's not the blood. The color that you're shining is white light. Blue light, ultraviolet light, that's absorbed strongly, can't get through. The fact that you see red means red can get through. We're going to work with infrared light. Can't see it, but it can get through it, biological sample. And the question we would pose then is whether this biological sample could be excited by this particular.
So, there is a whole merging of technologies. And I'm just going to pull something out from left field, but your modern smartphone is now equipped with somewhere in the range of something like 500 infrared lasers on it.
That was a couple years ago, by the way. Go ahead. You're doing great. I shouldn't have said anything.
It's kind of good for us because it can do nifty things like scan your face, and you don't see the infrared. But by the same token, those wavelengths of infrared light can actually penetrate a little bit deeper, depending on how they've tuned it, deeper even under the surface of the skin. So you don't see it. And so I just want to make a point, we've got consumer level devices that are equipped with infrared lasers, and many of them, and it's more now, and they keep getting better and better. So we're zeroing in on infrared being a kind of a key frequency to use for imaging inside of flesh, if you will.
Indy, I sent you a picture of the light spectrum and the human's visible ability for humans to see.
I gonna get that. It's in. Oh, I see it. Yep, I see it. And I don't want to screw this share up, but I'll get that loaded on another machine. Okay, thank you, Chris.
Yep.
All right, let him continue with this. It gets it to me. I mean, it's all maybe just geeky stuff, right? But if you understand the basics of what he's talking about, this has a huge amount of relevance to medical technology and a number of other associated areas. Let's go on.
You see, red means red can get through. We're going to work with infrared light. Can't see it, but it can get through a biological sample. And the question we would pose then is whether this biological sample could be excited by this particular red light. Red light is lower energy. And so I'm going to try again here with my little camera to give you a sense of a pulse of light. Let's see if change hands here.
Now, I've previewed this. There's a very fine nuance about this that he goes with. Now, see if you can catch what it is. He said one of the clues is that infrared is low energy, and they need to use low energy so that they don't actually destroy cells, okay? But see if you can catch the little nuance, because they can still use that infrared. Here we go.
We have our pulse of light, but what's going to happen with the red light now is we only get this, all right? It's working. We got excitation, but it's relatively low energy. It's not going to interact with too much. But we do have now some light trapped on this nanoparticle. So what would happen if we fire or capture another bit of light? Maybe we can increase that. That idea of capturing one photon, storing it, and adding a second pulse of light to it to increase the amplitude, that's upconversion.
So what they call this in atomic physics lingo is when you input energy into an atom, the electrons move to higher energy level orbits. The lower energy levels are close to the nucleus. The higher energy levels, the higher the energy level of the electron, the further and faster out from the nucleus it spins around. And that has a concomitant impact on what type of energy might come back out of that atom. And that's what he means by the upconverting. So they using it continue to add in infrared light energy into this nanoparticulate structure and continue elevating its electrons to higher and higher orbitals, if you will.
One photon, storing it, and adding a second pulse of light to it to increase the amplitude, that's upconversion. So the name for the nanoparticles we use are upconverting nanoparticles. And of course, we could imagine even more energy going in. And in fact, that makes life interesting because we can have enough energy to actually cause an effect. And that effect, in this case, obviously it's broken something. Imagine this at the nanoscale. At the nanoscale, we're talking about molecules, we're talking about bonds. If we can break a bond of something that's attached to the nanoparticle, we can release it. Okay,
this is just highly, highly relevant stuff when we're talking about the chemical bonds inside molecular structures in the molecules of our cells. Highly relevant. And if you can just get those nanoparticles into the right place where you can cause enough excitation and do it with a form of electromagnetic energy that's not toxic overall to the organism, then you can energize these nanoparticles to the point that they will have been located near the target of what it is that they're supposed to maybe break apart. And the genetic code of a cancer cell, for example, or any of a number of other potential malfunctions, or any of a number of, you could fill in the blanks with a lot of other possibilities.
It's not just breaking chemical. It's not just breaking chemical bonds. That what he's talking about there could be the trigger event to open up medication, where you have a nano-encapsulated medication and you use a nanoparticle to break a chemical bond in the example he gave, that would then start causing a cascade of events that ultimately resulted in a delivery of a microdose of very, very potent medication. Another possible
to a precise target, TMC.
Right. And cancer was a great example because it's exactly what the patents, some of the patents that I look at regarding nanotech anyway, that's what they talk about, is being able to steer nanotech, medicine, therapeutics, if you will, genetic and otherwise, to a particular location, elicit some type of a triggering event, whether it be a magnetic field, light, ultrasound, heat, a change in pH, a change in temperature, whatever. And that is like literally the key that unlocks the lock or opens the door that then allows the medication that's incredibly potent to only be delivered directly nearby target tissue. And that saves the rest of the organism, the rest of the body from having to undergo like intravenous chemotherapy, for example.
Right.
The other thing this could do is if they pulse upconverted nanoparticles with infrared light and they get enough energy to be stored there, enough photons to be stored there, the light that is emitted from the nanotech, the nanoparticle, it doesn't necessarily have to break anything. It literally could emit a blue light, or it could emit a yellow light, or an orange light, or a purple light, or a red light. It can do that. And all that really means is that the material that's used is picked very, very, very particularly. The size, shape, orientation of the nanotech has to all be engineered and designed very, very particularly so that they know with some certainty, and I'm talking like 90% certainty kind of a thing for it to be considered therapeutic, that when they phase it with light, it will emit a particular wavelength of electromagnetic radiation every time.
Exactly. And that could either be because they know what they want to detect. They've got a detector tuned for that exact frequency, or stimulate. There could be something that is going to be biologically active in a deleterious way to that frequency of light. And they once again, selective targeting of not just cells or little pieces of cells, but really subcellular molecular structures, small stuff.
What really comes to mind in the larger scale of how I see this technology, one of the ways I see this technology being applied is something like the use of optogenetics, where they have a wide library of various what they call channel rhodopsins, which are protein structures that are all different. They're different channel rhodopsins that can be genetically added to the outside of a cell wall. So it can be genetically added to neurons. And optogenetics is the science of being able to stimulate and manage the brain using light. So if you have a library of channel rhodopsins that then are responsive to the palette of color from infrared up to violet and all the colors in between, you can then begin to add particular types of nanotechnology that's tuned and manufactured in such a way so that when something like infrared light that is emitted from everything, nearly everything that's electronic multimedia interface that we have, TV, phone, laptop, whatever, even lights emit infrared light, there is opportunity there to have energy absorbed by the nanotechnology, whatever it is. And I'm not saying this is happening, but this is one of the long-term applications of a combination of these kinds of technologies. You've got laser arrays that exist in iPhones, and I'll show you a video real quick soon what that looks like on your face. We just heard from this guy, as well as many others, that's very common. Infrared passes all the way through the body. And this guy's talking about upconverting nanoparticles, where they use infrared light to store energy inside of things that can fit inside of cells, nanotech, that then emit concentrated energy, an elevated amount of energy, where it stores up the infrared light energy and it burps out or coughs up or ejects some other type of energy. And when you look at this from an optogenetics point of view, how does a wireless light brain-computer interface work without the need for wearables, without the need for something to be stuck on your head all the time? You would genetically modify cells to have them express those channel rhodopsins I was referring to. You would know which genetic code, which channel rhodopsin, I want a yellow over here and a blue over here and a red over here and a green over here, based on what cell type or what protein or what cell type receptor you're looking for that's specific to a type of neuron, for example, and those would all get coded with yellow. And then you'd pick another receptor type that was specific to another type of neuron or a different center in the brain. That would be a blue. And this is the generic example, right? Once that's done, the only thing that's needed at that point is some way to stimulate.
That's right.
Upconverted nanoparticles, if they don't biodegrade, or if you have to somehow, some way, on an ongoing basis, get something like a booster shot, it's not going to be too far along before the environment is ripe to deploy an optogenetics wireless interface in mass.
Now,
I mean, and you look at the last drill that was done here. It was in 2019 or 2018. It was Operation Crimson. I mean, Crimson is like one of the first known channel rhodopsins that they used for optogenetics, and optogenetics has been around for like 40 years, and it really got good in the late 90s and early 2000s. And Crimson is one of like a very, very, very commonly understood channel rhodopsin for optogenetics. But you don't even need, the bottom line is, you don't even need nanotech to stimulate your brain. You don't. The infrared light all by itself can stimulate the brain. What the nanotech is going to do is allow a greater spread, a greater set of tools to be delivered into an organism, whether it be the brain or somewhere else in the body, to then offer a variety of ways to stimulate, or a variety of selective stimulation switches that will exist.
And I want, I would think it might be a good intellectual exercise. I want the people who watch this to connect some of the dots about what some of the possibilities are. I won't name a whole lot of them. I don't want to opinionate, politicize, or polarize our discussion in any way. But when you consider the structures that we're talking about, when you consider the technology that's being developed, and when you consider what some of the possibilities are, we know from the past that what we read 20, 30 years ago, if you're old like me, as science fiction came true. A lot of it has. And so what you're hearing now isn't even science fiction. We can even get into it and show you patented technologies, devices, and particles, all sorts of things. And we have done it on other shows
stuff
too.
For blindness right now, there's available medical therapy for blindness that use everything we've just talked about. They use optogenetic therapies, and they use upconverted nanoparticles to restore artificial sight in humans. Like that is a real existing thing. Like it's been done. It's done.
So refresh my memory now. When we're talking about upconverted, we're talking about inputting a certain frequency of energy into a particle, and then when it emits back out, it emits a different frequency back out. Is that it?
Yeah, it's a higher wavelength, a higher energy photon. So you're adding low energy photons, and you're getting a high energy photon emission.
All right. So as I look at this spectrum scale here, if let's say that we've decided that that the energy range that we need to input is in the infrared, because A, it's not directly toxic to cells, and B, it has the power to penetrate deeper into tissues rather than either be reflected right off the surface or absorbed at the surface and, cause something like a sunburn like ultraviolet would. And then if there are designed nanoparticles inside that organism, then if they upconvert, if they've been designed to upconvert in particular ways, then as we input the infrared, we might see certain molecules emit back out in a green or in a yellow or in a blue or in an indigo. I'm kind of partial to indigo, based on the design of the particle, correct? So energy we're inputting is harmless to the organism, and we're getting, based on what the affinity that those particular nanoparticles had, we're getting a readback of a particular color, which can be detected as it comes back out once it's emitted back out. Is that something like what they could do?
Yeah, I've got a. I'm going to look for a file here real quick that shows.
All right, we're going to go further with this. While you look for that, I'm going to see what Dr. Kroll has to say next. And it is the applications for this are quite wide-ranging, and remembering the scale, the size scale, and remembering relative to a nanoparticle how large DNA is. So if nanoparticles constructed, self-constructed nanotubes or whatever, and wanted to grapple onto certain segments of RNA or DNA, they would be able to do that. And with the proper steering and direction, they could go right to a particular site. Very, very cool stuff.
Can release a cargo or a therapeutic agent and ask how that actually opens something. Imagine this at the nanoscale. At the nanoscale, we're talking about molecules, we're talking about bonds. If we can break a bond of something that's attached to the nanoparticle, we can release it. We can release a cargo or a therapeutic agent and ask how that actually works.
So I got another one that I didn't pull clips from, but I'd almost like to show it.
I'm going to steal share for a minute.
Oh, sure. Yep. And I will be...
Here's upconverted.
Yeah, TMC, I'll be off microphone for about 30 seconds, but I'm listening to you.
Yeah, you're fine. So here's a white paper from Harvard, or if Harvard participated in it, and it's transfer-encoded magnetic upconversion nanoparticles for efficient photodynamic therapy with near-infrared irradiation, luminescent bioimaging. So near-infrared excitation in here. And I'm just showing you this for posterity's sake. Here's another one. Nanoparticles in mice brains light up and trigger memories. This is IEEE spectrum, no optical fibers or headgear, no implants. This is new optogenetic systems. This is the new optogenetics, right? Systems that enable scientists to control cell behavior using simple flashes of visible light. You mean like flashes of visible light? This is invisible light, mind you, but it's real close to visible light. Flashes, infrared light, the 500 plus lasers that Indy was talking about earlier, that Mary Lou Jepson actually mentioned, who worked for Google and Facebook for a number of years in their display departments.
Is it the LiDAR?
It's basically LiDAR. It's infrared LiDAR. But what this does is it emits, it says here 30,000 dots on your face. So it's got a flat substrate that's up there that has a bunch of laser LEDs, and they go through prisms, or they go through beam splitters basically to duplicate the dots. And you get less than a 1% energy loss per duplication. So if you have, in the example that we've provided, right, 500 lasers, you can duplicate that a number of times, dozens of times, and have power output not be affected. You could have the same power output, relatively speaking, within like 1% from the first 500 when compared to the beam split second 500, the beam split third 500, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 times that you split it, you still get the same amount of power. There's like literally no loss. And that's how they can get all of these dots to project. And every single one of these dots is addressable. They know which dot is which, and they know
they have to be TMC. They have to be, in order for it to paint an image of your face. It has to know which dot's pointing where.
Yeah. So when they talk about using flashes of light, right? You've got visible light, you've got infrared light, and so what they're talking about in this paper, IEEE, is where it was published, the IEEE spectrum, right? They're talking about they successfully manipulated deep brain cells in mice using a light-based tool without an invasive surgical procedure. Paulina Anikiva, we've heard of her before, professor at MIT. She's in the material sciences department. Optogenetics involves genetically altering neurons to make them sensitive to light. Then they shine the light on it, typically from optical fibers. but they did something different here. It said here, optogenetics tool can be applied non-invasively as long as the target neurons are close to the skin surface where an external visible light can penetrate easily. Well, infrared goes all the way through your body, so you just need optogenetics that are in the infrared range, but I'm digressing here.
I've got my science fiction hat on here for a second, and it's not far-fetched. Imagine a med bed, okay? Imagine that you lie your body down onto a bed of essentially LED lasers, and imagine that on board in your body, a whole lot of nanoparticles have been put in there. They've been put into you for the purpose of basically just being little utility soldiers. They can be told to do what they need to do. So you've got the nanoparticles, and I'm going to call them nano devices, inside there. And then you lie on that med bed, and it can address various groups of these nano devices and cause them to do certain things. This could be a healing technology, an amazingly powerful healing technology. It's not science fiction. It's almost science fiction, but it's like, Star Trek coming true almost.
Yeah, we're getting to that point. I think they've been there for a while, but they're starting to roll this stuff out now because they're ready to commercialize it. So they say here in this article, which was a while ago, National University of Singapore, along with Japan, looks like Riken Brain Science Institute, they managed to emit visible light deep inside the brain using only nanoparticles delivered with an injection. The nanoparticles, called upconversion nanoparticles, emit visible light by absorbing and converting near-infrared light. The source for the near-infrared light can come from outside the skin. No implant necessary because near-infrared light can penetrate tissue further than visible light. So they inject light-sensitizing genes into the mouse brain. Then separately inject the specially designed nanoparticles and then beam near-infrared light at the target area of the brain. So this right here is a big deal in the world in which we live, in my opinion, as it relates to the diet injections and injunctions that are used in mass to control the masses. Diets, injections, and injunctions. Inject light sensitizing genes, genetic therapy, into a mouse, into their brain, then inject specially designed nanoparticles, and then beam near infrared light into the target areas of the brain, and you get deep brain stimulation. But the dots are invisible to your eyes, so it must be safe. It's not blinding you. So, it's got to be safe. Operation Crimson. Operation Crimson. Let's move on. So here's kind of how it works. So you get the genetic modification, right, through an injection, gene therapy. Then you get the nanoparticles.
Hold on.
Yeah.
Those, by gene therapy, we're talking about at the messenger RNA and DNA level. So that's when we're talking genes, we're talking DNA and RNA. So
yeah, where it goes in and optogenetics, what it will do is it'll put light sensitive ion channels on the outside of target neurons. What that means is that those ion channels that regulate the voltage that tells your brain when to fire and when not to fire, what brain cells to fire, it regulates that voltage using light.
Fantastic.
Light sensitive ion channels, otherwise known as channel rhodopsins.
Well, that's one avenue that you could go down. That avenue would be going down the direction of helping to minimize some sort of a brain neurological malfunction. Maybe
they talk about using They talk about using it for epilepsy and Alzheimer's treatment, all kinds of stuff, as well as, like I said, they treat blindness with this.
Okay, treating blindness. Mm-hmm. Okay,
they can convert. If you still have functionality in your eyes, but you just can't see, right? Then they can convert particular cells in the eye to be responsive to light. and that they're literally giving you genetic therapy in your eye, optogenetic style gene therapy in your eye to
Right.
restore some type of vision, so
Right.
that those cells they convert. What they're doing is they're converting the light into electrical impulses. That's really what optogenetics is doing. That's the science of using light. It's the science of genetically manipulating a cell so that when you shine light on the cell, the cell emits electricity. So it's a transducer. You're
Yep.
converting light, photons, into electricity.
But TMC, there's a lot more associated with this technology, and definitely legitimately within the umbrella of its scope in terms of doing other things with genes.
Oh yeah,
And genes in particular other targeted areas, whether they be malfunctioning organs like a pancreas or whatever. You can pick from a number of different types of cells.
That's right. And here's where you can buy quantum dots and upconverted nanoparticles on the open internet.
Right there. Look at that.
Yep. ACS material. Graphene quantum dots, blue luminescent graphene quantum dots, oil dispersible upconverted nanoparticles. Oh, how lovely.
Oil dispersible, that would be more lipid soluble, fat soluble, and that would tend to carry them more to certain areas that are fat based, and that includes cell membranes as one. Those have a lot of lipid content in them.
I was under the impression it's a good place to put stuff in the lipids.
Yes.
Well, yeah, the lipids are
it is.
It's a very common way to store or deliver stuff into the body because the body loves fat.
Yep.
And the brain particularly your brain's mostly fat. I mean, that's what
mine's extra fatty.
Mine is fat. You beat me to it. Yep.
Yeah.
That's right.
So here's upconverted nanoparticles that are, they're shows you right here what they emit or what they absorb. Not really sure.
They specify the particle size.
Yeah. Wavelength in nanometers, the absorbance, I'm sure that's a factor of some type. And this is chemical and biochemical conjugation. So they're nearly spherical. They talk about the surface charge of them because this has to do with the way that they can be dressed with other materials. When you're building a nano compound and you want to add a quantum dot, in this case, a fluo dot, that you have to know with this kind of stuff so that you can create the right kind of
charge.
Ionic bonding. Exactly. Charge is a better word. That's right.
Yep.
So 10 to 13 nanometers plus or minus 2 nanometers. And
imagine your wool shirt and your nylon comb, and you brush the nylon comb across the shirt, and then there's a pile of dust on the table, and you just wave that comb over the dust, and the dust is all electrically attracted to the comb.
Yeah. Sucrose or glucose. So these things, these come in, this isn't in like food grade, food stable stuff. Sucrose, glucose, protein, lipid, carbohydrate, and buffer salts are what are also included, I guess, in what this material is when you buy it. And it says here, application, this is what they're selling this as, what it can do. Cell imaging, solar cell coding, protease detection, bio-LEDs.
Very small LEDs, nano-sized LEDs.
Bio-LED, right. So what it is, you can use that for, when they say cell imaging, they can use them as tags to track. So what you would do is you'd say, we want to look at whatever's coming out of your kidney, and you have a kidney problem, or you're on dialysis or whatever. And so what they do is they would make medicine that would then be able to be delivered through something like an IV, and it would go and it would find your kidneys, and it would dump the solution that was injected through the IV basically into your kidneys through targeted. It would look for kidney cells based on unique receptors that are available specifically in a kidney.
Talk about targeting for a second. First of all, just reviewing, setting the stage here. These are very, very small particles. And if we're talking about delivery systems, first of all, they are so small that they'll stay airborne in the air indefinitely. That's one thing. But if we had a particular type of if we used, for example, a virus to incorporate these things into the virus that would have an affinity for a particular type of cell, And technically, it would be like infecting the body with a virus, and the virus has inside it some of these nanoparticles. Well, viruses are known to target certain parts of a body, whether it be your joints or your respiratory system or whatever it might be. And if such a thing were designed that way, that's another delivery medium. And it could be it could have applicability in certain situations, depending on what they're trying to do.
Yep. So that's really what I wanted to show you when I took share, was just that, this is a really, really, really viable technology. And here's just some other nanoparticle. It just comes in liquid, man. This stuff you could ingest this stuff and it's in your body. Where it goes, what it does, that's the science, that's the chemistry, it's the biochemistry.
That's right.
That's involved in this. But
that's right. And what it absorbs and what it emits is a byproduct of which one of these that you selected.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So for what I just selected is just generic upconversion nanoparticles, biodetection, photodynamic therapy, and photoactivation of anti-cancer drugs and biomolecules.
I take it.
Has anybody seen the ads for those miracle glues that are out there? You put this glue on something, and it's just liquid, but when you shine the particular kind of light on it, and it's ultraviolet light, I believe, at low intensity, on the glue, it chemically causes the glue to become hard, very hard. And it's waterproof, it's dirt proof, it's very strong as epoxy. It's that type of effect where you have something that by itself, it's not going to do anything. But when you hit it with a particular electromagnetic wavelength, then it chemically activates it in such a way that in that case, it turns it into a hard glue. I wanted to get some of that stuff to experiment with it.
Yeah, I'm going to give you share back.
I think women use it for their fingernails, acrylic.
You could. Probably would make a very, very hard finish on the fingernails. All right, so I'll take the share back.
I take a silver supplement that's
excellent.
Nanoscopic.
Excellent. Because it's most biologically beneficial if it's really, really small. All right, so back to Ulrich Krull in his TEDx University of Texas presentation. I think there's only one clip left. And I got a couple of others, too, from other people. And at any point in time, if you want to TMC that other clip, which I was not able to review yet anyway, if we wanted to work that in, we could.
The nanoparticle creation?
Yeah, we're a little bit beyond halfway through. Let's finish up with Ulrich first. Okay. Let's see which one I'm playing here.
Think of taking a cell, shining ultraviolet light at it, and then asking, how is the cell doing? Of something that's at least a cargo or a therapeutic agent, and ask how that actually works. Well, that then leaves us at the point where we can assemble our nanoparticle device. And so this is a cartoon again of some of the stuff that
we can assemble our nanoparticle device. Aren't you guys loving this? Wow.
Then leaves us at the point where we can assemble our nanoparticle device. And so this is a cartoon again of some of the stuff that gets stuck on it. But more importantly, we're going to think about it from the following perspective. First one is that we know that we're going to have a number of processes happening simultaneously. We can actually have a process where we absorb one photon, and with any luck, I can get this to go a little bit larger to give you a sense that there's a second one that's absorbed. But by the same token, we can actually have two processes happening at the same time, two processes at different energy.
I just want to say right now, I can't do what he's doing, all right? I flunked juggling, and this is even harder.
We can have multiple processes at different energy, which means one nanoparticle can actually convey multiple colors, and each color can be used for a different purpose. I'll give you the simplest example, two colors. We'll have blue and we'll have green. Green is going to be our analytical channel. We're going to measure something. Well, the first thing we need to do is measure something. We have nothing that we're measuring yet. On this diagram, you'll see the old double helix, the DNA. That's how most people recognize it. But this is chemistry for somebody in a chemistry lab. It's possible to dissociate that. You can have two single strands. If they see each other, they'll wrap up together. But what we're interested in is just having one single strand and attaching it to the nanoparticle. That means that if we get the nanoparticle into the cell, it will be hunting for its complementary strand. How do you know that it found it? Well, maybe the green.
Okay, so this gets a little bit more complex, but it's really pretty simple. DNA exists as a double helix, and it's comprised of one strand that's got one set of sequences on it, and its complementary pair is the other strand. And they naturally attract each other, and they wrap together and entwine. So if we had a single strand floating out there that was designed with as a nanoparticle payload DNA strand, then that's what he's talking about it hunting for. It's hunting for the other half. It's mating half, if you will.
For its complementary strand. How do you know that it found it? Well, maybe the green color turns on. How do you know how much of the material it's found? The more binding, more green color, the intensity goes up. So we can actually track nucleic acids and other materials inside the cell. You can also think of that blue channel or the UV channel. We can turn off and on that nanoparticle to be able to cut a bond and release something, and then we can ask whether or not that material that's been released has actually made a difference in terms of the amount of chemistry that's going on. You measure the chemical communication. As you put all of this together, you have to be able to protect this nanoparticle from being chewed up by the cell. So we put on stealth masking systems. We put on.
Okay, so there's a lot to absorb here. And for those of us who have been following this, and elements, threads that you can tie in from this are in, once again, some of our previous episodes, and you can find them over on humaninternet.org as well. This ties in with some other associated technologies that work synergistically with this.
Chemistry that's going on. You measure the chemical communication. As you put all of this together, you have to be able to protect this nanoparticle from being chewed up by the cell. So we put on stealth masking systems. We put on materials that allow it to slip into a cell. At the top of this diagram, you'll see something that looks like a Y shape. That's an antibody. At the arms, the ends of that antibody, those are the parts that can grab the so-called antigen. For example, a part of a protein. If you knew what the cell contained, and you put that antibody in to grab a particular protein in that cell, it would drag the entire nanoparticle to that location in the cell.
Okay. Guys, catching all this? Pretty cool. If we knew what was in the cell, and we do know what's in a lot of cells, and therefore we know that if there's an antibody floating around, and we build the nanoparticle with an antigen that antibody is going to grab, then it's going to grab the whole thing, and it's basically going to deliver the rest of what was in the nanoparticle to a target location. Pretty cool.
So you can actually localize the nanoparticle and then do all of your chemical interpretation in that zone.
And there we go. That might have been the last clip that I had. Let me see here. Yeah, that was.
Okay.
That was. Yep, that was the last clip that I had on that one.
That guy looks familiar.
I couldn't hear you. Say that again.
I said that guy looks familiar. The one that you just put on the screen. I'm gonna show the precision nano system.
Nice.
Yeah, I'm gonna show, just because they were talking about self-assembly and having all these different parts and pieces on the same piece of nanotech. I'm gonna give you an idea of what that looks like. I'm going to start over because I didn't click the box to share sound just in case we end up getting that far. Here we go. This is, you can buy this. This is a legit product.
Simple manufacture of nanoparticles using microfluidics. Our mixing cartridge promotes self-assembly of uniform particles with controllable, reproducible, and fully scalable results. One example is solid core lipid nanoparticles to deliver genetic medicines, which are easily made in one step using the
Well, that sounds real familiar to a lot of people right now, right?
Yes,
Very
it does.
early.
Lipid nanoparticle with genetic material inside. Let's move on.
microfluidic cartridge. The nucleic acid of interest is fed through one inlet, and the lipid components are fed through the second. Encapsulation of the genetic material in a dense lipid core occurs on the nanoliter scale in a millisecond time frame. Tuning input parameters such as flow rate ratios and lipid components enables predictable size control to optimize particles for encapsulation efficiency, targeting, and application-specific benefits. The advantages of the technology stem from the microfluidic chamber, which enables rapid mixing under laminar conditions. Proprietary architectures bring the fluids together in a non-turbulent, exquisitely controlled manner. Mixing rates are faster than particle assembly time, and every particle is manufactured under the same localized conditions. As the fluids mix, on first contact, the cationic lipids complex with the negatively charged nucleic acid to form the beginnings of the particle core. The helper lipids aggregate further as they come into contact with the aqueous solution. Finally, the PEG lipids orient themselves on the surface with hydrophobic tails pointing inwards. This process creates uniform particles and is highly reproducible. For increased volumes, the physics of one mixer can be parallelized to scale output seamlessly from milliliters to full GMP manufacture at tens or hundreds of liters, while maintaining identical manufacturing parameters.
Crazy. So now we're going to see.
Look what they just built there. See what the animation showed them building was a lipid encapsulated
Precision nanos.
Good.
payload.
I'd already loaded, so
It's okay.
I didn't know you were gonna.
No, it's
Yeah,
fine.
you can go from kitchen table to an entire production facility and get the same results. Is what this company is advertising. But this is how it's gonna. Just watch.
Systems transfection kits encapsulate nucleic acids in proprietary lipid nanoparticles that mediate high transfection efficiency in
All right, so they got a lot of fancy doctor words there, but the bottom line is this system is a platform to create nanotechnology that includes genetic information, mRNA, right there,
Right.
siRNA, plasmids, and DNA.
Did you hear the word that she used? Transfection efficiency.
Yeah,
Transfection
that's what happens when you get an STD, right? I'm kidding.
No. Well, maybe. All right. The straightforward process in cells is for the master code to be stored in DNA, and at a particular point, a command is issued whereby messenger RNA will come along. The DNA will unwind, and the messenger RNA will read a piece of that DNA, and then the messenger RNA will carry that segment of code, which is usually going to be coding for a protein of some sort, and there are many proteins, and then that messenger RNA carries that code to things called ribosomes, which then manufacture the protein that the messenger RNA carried. That's the normal process. Now, the term that she used was transfection. Transfection is the reverse process. It is a process by which messenger RNA has got information that it is bringing to the DNA, and a command is issued for the DNA to unwind and open up, at which point the messenger RNA will either splice, duplicate, or insert a piece of new code
Or
onto and into that DNA. That is called transfection. And that was the term that she used. It's
Nanocellin.
in one way, it's kind of, oh, Chris, I'm sorry.
I just want to say, TMC, do you get some nanocellin for that?
Nanocillin.
Nanocillin.
I like it.
For your STD.
Yeah. I get it.
Alrighty.
Even more. Yeah, that's good. That's good.
So it's kind of big because the DNA is the master code, And when other genetic materials such as messenger RNA bring information into and onto the DNA, it gets incorporated, and it's usually rather permanent. It's kind of a permanent code edit to the DNA, if you will. It's relatively permanent.
Here we go.
Transfection efficiency in difficult to transfect cells, in vitro and in vivo. Our lipid nanoparticles efficiently transfect primary cell lines and stem cells by exploiting the low-density lipoprotein receptor endocytosis pathway. Nanoparticles are applied to cells in culture. Apolipoprotein E, or ApoE, adsorbs onto the surface of the lipid nanoparticle. ApoE is a ligand for the LDL receptor. As LDL receptors are ubiquitously expressed on primary cells, this mechanism can be exploited to promote nanoparticle uptake in a wide variety of cells.
What you're seeing there is a basic nanoparticle that then had some function occur when it was introduced into the environment, that it put little binder markers on the outside of the nanotech that then the cells themselves have the receptors for those particular binder markers. And that's what you're watching there. So you had the original, the small yellow dots that make up the sphere, but then you had those things that added on the top that look like barnacles or whatever. And those are what the cell is looking for. So this is where it becomes modular, and that the chemistry stuff the guy was talking about, this is the kind of stuff they're measuring. If this, then that. Can I measure after if this, then that? Can I measure the outcome of that to know how successful that was? So
can everybody connect some dots when we're talking about getting outside genetic material? And now in nature, there's a lot of genetic material floating around. It gets on our skin, we eat it, we drink it, we digest it, we inhale it. If there were something natural, it's probably something that's going to do whatever might happen. Maybe effects that you'd never even notice. Or in some cases, you might catch a cold. Okay. What if we in laboratory are specifically designing little blobs like this thing that's on the screen that are bringing in particular code for a particular desired purpose? And she went by it pretty fast, but I think that she indicated that their transfection efficiency, both, I think she said germlines as well. It was maybe back 30 seconds. And other things. I'll recognize the graphic if you get to it. I'm watching. Yeah, it's a little before that. Yeah, right in around there someplace. Yes, it was that little segment right there.
Let's see.
Okay. So
lines and stem cells.
See what you're seeing right there.
The low-density lipoprotein receptor.
Yeah, we'll go back.
Back. You can freeze frame it right there because we could talk about that for a second. You're getting there. Yeah, there you go. Okay. So what you're seeing on your screen is they are disclosing to you that they have developed a technology to be able to input information by way of this process of getting into a cell, both into primary cell lines and stem cells. And stem cells are kind of like, they're really important cells because they can differentiate into anything. But under proper command and control, a stem cell can be commandeered to differentiate into a particular type of cell. And I guess she didn't mention germline cells. She did mention primary cell lines and stem cells. So on your screen, you're seeing a huge power of the ability to modify cells. That's kind of all I wanted to say about that. And I think you had gone a little further ahead.
Yeah, well, this is... we're living this right now, so pay attention.
LDL receptors are ubiquitously expressed on primary cells. This mechanism can be exploited to promote nanoparticle uptake in a wide variety of cells. Endogenously circulating ApoE facilitates uptake of the nanoparticles in vivo, while nanoparticles transfecting cells in culture may require the addition of exogenous ApoE.
So they're talking about this system being used in the body or in a lab, both.
Yep.
That's all in vivo and in vitro mean. In vivo means it's happening in the body, and in vitro means it doesn't happen in the body. You have to do it with a doctor.
Right.
The lipid nanoparticle ApoE complex is recognized by the LDL receptor. Endocytosis takes place, and the receptor particle complex is invaginated by the cell to form an endosome. As the endosome matures, internal pH changes promote nanoparticle lipids to interact with endosomal lipids and release the nucleic acids into the cytoplasm.
So again, these are the chemical things they're talking about being able to want to measure while they're happening, either in a cell culture or actually in the body. All of these different stages or steps. Yeah, you made the nanoparticle, you've delivered the nanoparticle.
Delivered it.
It has been uptaken, and now it's dispersing. And you want to be able to understand everything or as much as you can in each one of these steps throughout the entire process using the measurement component of what the gentleman was talking about earlier.
So just commentary from anybody and out in the chat as well. If indeed we're designing particular strands or strings of RNA, messenger RNA, and we have the ability to distribute them amongst a population for whatever reason, and it's nucleic code, it's gene code. And if, as this lady has narrated and illustrated, the process of transfection has delivered this into cells, released it from the capsule that was in those cells, so that now we have a nucleic acid which is going to be bound for whatever target that it was designed to have an affinity for, then we have a lot of power with such things as, I don't want to say the words because it triggers a potential, censoring of a video or something. But when we have the ability to deliver messenger RNA into a cell, what do you think would be the possibilities depending on what the design of that messenger RNA strand was? And I leave it to you to fill in the blanks. A lot of power there.
Yeah, well, this talks about greater than an 80% effectiveness in the example they're using here, gene knockdown.
Why do they use the term gene knockdown? I wonder what that means.
I don't know. Maybe it's a transfection kit, so maybe it's supposed to, for something like cancer, gene knockdown would be. It sounds like a good thing.
Yeah, right.
If you want to break down or destroy or disrupt cancerous genetic information or genetic information that is producing cancer, then this seems like it.
Maybe it takes a gain of function away from something.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, it's a great example. Gene knockdown, and we're dancing around it. We're kind of getting there. It's probably a lot of things.
Right. I was kind of going more on the angle of just splicing and editing the DNA by way of transfection, but they're talking about just wholesale knocking the gene right down.
Yeah, this is one example that this company chose to use to put out a advertising video, but what we're looking at, what we just got done looking at, this is a delivery platform for many, 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 many things. It's not just for one particular type of gene therapy. I mean, you're talking about introducing something into a biologic organism and coding it in such a way where it's actually absorbed by the cell and the cell thinks it's good and does something with it. It could be good, it could be bad, it could be completely useless. But the bottom line is they've figured out how to get access into very, very particular places in your body.
Yeah, this would imply a method for curing cancer. Yeah. All you need to know is you need to know a lot, but to oversimplify, you need to know the code for those aberrant cells, right? And how to take them down or disable them some. You either got a way to deliver a cure for cancer, or you could even cause it too. Either way. But this stream is for entertainment purposes only.
Mm-hmm. And in it goes. Hello. Into your cells, and they will forevermore be different. They will never be the same. They will never be the same. They will never be the same.
So the piece that Ulrich Krell featured was some of the physics and the mechanics of how some of this works and how we can do detection. So we're talking right now, we're looking at transfection, and it's all with nanoparticles, though. It's all nano-sized, designed little molecules. That's the common theme for the show here. And we have a few minutes left, and maybe if we really scoot, maybe I can show a couple of other little things. There's another couple of videos that I might like to show. It's in the range of what we're talking about, and it allows us to shift the conversation a little bit. And let me look for where I put it. Okay.
Real quick, if that happens in the cell, let's say if it's like a salmon, and then you do that and change the cell, is it still a salmon, or is it a salmon-esque? Or
it'd be changed.
I'd say it's chimeric. It'd be chimeric by definition at that
chimeric,
point.
Yeah. Okay.
Some of this stuff happens in nature. Nature does a lot of this type of thing on its own, and nature has a kind of a way of meandering around, and something that works or something that is that affords an advantage to a particular organism in a specific environment, then that organism thrives. But nature's really great at balancing itself, because if you get a lot of that type of critter around, whatever it is, then nature also starts favoring something else that can take advantage of eating it as a food source, let's say. So nature is continually balancing itself, and it's been doing it for, I don't know, millions of years. Let me move on. I want to get to this young lady. Her name is Katie Liu. And I want to feature this a little bit because I applaud the attention and the depth of thought that some people who are a whole lot younger than me seem to have. And I really, really appreciate that. This is Katie Liu at TEDx Youth. And this is not very long. There's two fairly short segments here. I just want to run them and just let you guys hear them. So here she goes.
You've all probably heard the phrase before, everything's connected. But have you ever thought about what that really means? I personally don't think it's just a nice-sounding idea. I think it's scientifically true. In 1964, John Stuart Bell illustrated in quantum theory that any two atoms in the entire universe will later be connected in some sort of way. His theory suggested that no matter how far apart these two atoms are, they will always be intertwined in some shape or form. I believe that this theory also applies in our lives, with experiences and ideas. While they may remain separate in our minds, they all eventually come together to form our personal stories and beliefs.
I don't know about you guys, but you have no idea how much I appreciate young minds thinking. Good job, Katie.
My story starts in 8th grade, when my family and I went on a trip to Toronto. My mom's friend, a chemistry professor, told me about something called nanotechnology. He tried to help me understand just how small nanotechnology might be. He said, imagine the width of one single hair. Now, divide that by 100,000 times. How small do you think that is? My 8th grade mind was blown away by the notion of something so small actually being useful. We're used to being able to see and feel technology, such as with our phones and computers. And we really like big, large-scale solutions to problems. So sometimes we forget about the other end of the scale, the side that we can't see or feel. This smaller end of the scale harnesses a technology that is barely 3 atoms wide, and yet it has the power to clean our oceans, help treat cancer, and make more efficient solar cells. In 8th grade, my mind could barely process what all of this even meant. But I did know one thing. It was pretty cool. A few years later, this topic resurfaced in a pretty surprising place. In Avengers: Infinity War, Iron Man reveals a new suit that almost seems to grow and form around him as he walks. He then says, "Like it? It's nanotech." This got me thinking. By this point, we were using nanotechnology in many different areas and in many different ways. So what exactly was it doing to our environment?
So, if you think it's science fiction, we have we're not going to have time to get into it now, but we have on the drawing board, and we can show you, and we probably will at some episode in the future, self-assembling nanotechnological structures. And I'll let her go further.
Remember, everything's connected. So all of the amazing things that nanotechnology can do are also connected to its potential for disaster. In the excitement of invention and discovery, it's really easy to forget that our actions have consequences. In July of 2017, I started to study this problem a little bit further. What I found surprised me a lot. There are an estimated 2,000 consumer products on the market that use nanoparticles, and yet there are no regulations on their commercial usage at all.
So this isn't me saying this. This is an inquiring mind, pondering, asking questions, and observing the environment, and observing what is potential. Fantastic.
Additionally, the FDA and CDC do not have any sort of pre-market review or any special handling or labeling for nanoparticle products. What this leads to is nanoparticles inside of consumer products being improperly disposed of. For example, Bowie Company manufactures toothbrushes and washcloths that they advertise as antimicrobial because they contain silver nanoparticles. When consumers use these products, first they put them into and onto their bodies, and then they rinse all the nanoparticles inside down the sink. This is pretty alarming. Why? First, silver nanoparticles in particular have been shown to be extremely toxic to living cells. And secondly, when consumers rinse these products down the sink, they then go into wastewater treatment plants where they aren't filtered out. They then go into nearby streams and aquatic environments where they kill the organisms living there and eventually circle back to our very own drinking water.
She didn't say. Did she say circle back? Never mind.
I think she did.
All of these methods of releasing nanoparticles into the environment are extremely detrimental, and they all need to be curbed. Yet, when I looked for scientific articles and risk assessments about nanoparticles in the environment, I surprisingly found next to none. And this is beyond worrying, because the field of nanotechnology is expected to triple by the year 2021. This could lead to up to 12 million tons of silver nanoparticles being dumped into the environment every single year.
Now, Katie is highlighting silver because that's what she zeroed in on. But that is one of a whole spectrum of nanoparticles. And particles at this size are virtually impossible to filter out of anything with anything that we have. They're the size of molecules. Any filter that you make, that you're trying to filter one molecule from another one, it's virtually impossible to control the dispersal of all of this type of stuff. She's highlighting silver. I'm going to let her finish this and then go right to her last clip, which is a little shorter than this.
So in September of 2017, I started to investigate a solution to this problem. I began looking more into the different factors that affect nanoparticle toxicity. And a few of the factors that I found that had already been evaluated before were size of the particle, coating on the particle, and dissolution rate.
You are seeing a fantastic scientist in the making, right there.
Changing the shape of the particle used. So I'm almost done with my senior year of high school, and I'm beginning to realize the impact that a single person like you and me have on the environment. When I buy a product from the store, everything that I do with that product after I buy it affects those around me and the world around me. Companies like Bowie are inadvertently releasing these nanoparticles into waterways and streams where they kill aquatic life and end up back in the same water that we drink every single day. In order for us as consumers to more confidently buy these products that these companies sell, we need to be aware of exactly what is inside of these products and also all of the potential detriments that could come from using them. So I'd like to end by taking a step back. I think one of the most exciting things about doing research is the application of it. Sort of like with quantum theory, you can almost imagine all of the atoms around you that came together to form all of these innovative ideas and how they relate to the people around you. Likewise, you can also imagine all of the potential that still exists around us right now. Similarly to with environmental toxicity with silver nanoparticles, I like to go back to my 6th grade science class, where I first learned the joy of discovery through making ice cream with simple chemical reactions. By experiencing this, I realized how such little things can physically change the world around us. Likewise, by working on research such as environmental nanotechnology, or simply just by understanding how buying one little product from the store has such a potentially huge impact, I believe we can come to better understand how we can personally make the world a better place. And that's a scene I want to be a part of making.
What do you think of that?
It's ideological. I mean, there's a lot of good facts in there. But yeah, it's good.
The key is to have thinking minds addressing the issues and inquiring and asking questions and looking at the possibilities, and then sometimes saying, wait, maybe we shouldn't go there, or maybe we shouldn't go there yet. Let me back up to...
Anybody seen her since she did this?
And let's look at the...
Say that again?
Has anybody seen her since she said that? Make sure she's okay.
I have not.
I'm serious. I mean,
I know you are. So I'm going to try to squeeze in. We have just enough time to squeeze this in. This is Professor Russell Cowburn. This is another TEDx talk, and I think that you might find this slightly interesting as well. Slightly different tack. Here we go.
And let's look at the nature's nanotechnology. Are we the first to do this, or actually is it already all around us? Let me just give you 2 little examples. If you were to go to South America, you would see flapping around in the trees something called the morpho butterfly. And it's a very pretty butterfly. You'd be struck by how beautiful it is. And it's got these iridescent, mother-of-pearl blue wings. And what's surprising about those wings is if you look at them under a microscope, is you discover that this beautiful blue color doesn't come from a pigment. So it's not as if the wings have been dyed blue. They actually come from banks after banks of naturally occurring nanostructures.
So you know how this happens is those banks after banks of nanostructures that he's talking about are actually, they're like prismatic filters. They are not colored themselves. They are not dyed themselves. They are creating a color by taking apart the light that's shining on them and reflecting certain frequencies back. Nature does this stuff. I found this to be quite fascinating, and I'm going to skip ahead because we're short on time.
Of the butterfly wings and all of these naturally occurring nanostructures already there in place. And actually, we don't even have to go as far as South America. We can do it in this very room. The enzyme that drives life is called ATP synthase. It's the thing that makes the rocket fuel that powers all of your cells. And if you look at the molecule of ATP synthase, it's actually a little nanobot. It's a little nanorobot. It's got a part that stays still, the stator, and there's another part of the molecule that rotates. And as it rotates, it makes the rocket fuel, the adenosine triphosphate, that drives all of your metabolism and keeps you alive. And from an evolutionary point of view, ATP synthase is very old. Nature has been using this nano machine to power life since the very beginning. And so it seems that rather than us doing something new for the first time, we are actually very late to the party, and that nature has been doing nanotechnology for millions of years before us.
So a question that I would ask is, if nature's been doing things at this nanoparticle scale for such a long time, and we're coming in late to the party, have we learned enough yet in order to be able to integrate newly designed nanoparticles into that whole environment without causing an unexpected outcome? Just saying. Any comments, you guys?
No, this is
What if you could shrink people into nanoscopic size?
Nano people. Chris.
We could invade an entire country. They would never see us coming.
They wouldn't even see us. We could float through the, wow. We could float.
that's how sophisticated invasion used to be back in the day. It's called raping and pillaging.
All right.
Nanoscopic sized, right? To inseminate. Anyway, whatever.
I'm just trying to squeeze the last. Okay,
go
we're almost on time. Here we go.
So finally, what about our theology? So the ethics are doing the right thing. What about our theology, about believing the right thing? And there's just one thing I want to pick out, because I think it's really interesting, and it's going to be a big deal in the future. And that's the idea of abiogenesis. Now, don't worry, I'm going to explain that word. So modern science has a pretty good idea of all of the different...
Okay, I'm going to skip ahead. Professor Cowburn, please forgive me. I'm just short on time here. So the universe and nature made molecules, and it made all kinds of things. They got more and more complex, and then here you see DNA over here, and then you see cellular structures that have got all sorts of amino acids, proteins, enzymes, and everything else in there. But along come us, and we get in here into this process, and we're doing little intercepts in here. We're doing things to modify what has been a very well-balanced path of natural life, not just here, but possibly elsewhere in the universe as well, for eons. And so that's what he's talking about. So here we go.
Then form bigger molecules like RNA and DNA, and then ultimately into single-cell creatures, and finally you and me here today. So that's the chain that we understand that gets us the origins of life from a scientific perspective. If, though, we look at this in real detail and say, which bits of this chain has science really nailed? Which bits are we really clear on the detail about? It would look something like this. We understand this part pretty well. We understand this part pretty well. To be honest, we haven't got a clue how you get from small molecules into big molecules, and we really haven't got a clue how you get from there into something as complex as the nanofactory that is a single-cell creature. Now, there's a mistake that people who think about the philosophy of science and religion would be very tempted to make at this point. And
this is real food for thought. Real food for thought. I'm not trying to say that I agree with them or disagree with them, but I found this really interesting.
We see it all the time. As soon as there is a chain of science that's associated with big questions like the origin of life, people immediately say, there's a missing link, that must be God. You see what we do? We say the bits we do understand are science, and the bits that we don't understand, they must be God. The big idea I want to share with you today is please don't do that. That is not the right way to think. That is a mistake. It's called the God of the gaps mistake. It's been made many times in history. The idea that we take the bits that science doesn't know how to handle and we call that God. Because if we do that...
Now, don't get triggered. Hear him out. Hear him out. This really did make a little bit of an impact on me.
Two things happen. First of all, it means as our science progresses, God gets smaller. And the other thing that happens is that we only ascribe God to a small part of the picture, when actually, as a Christian, I'd want to say God is everything. God is involved in the Big Bang. God is involved in the formation of the small molecules. All the bits that we understand, God is absolutely involved in evolution. These are God's mechanisms. The whole picture is God, and not just those little bits that science doesn't quite understand yet. The other thing that I know is that this area of uncertainty is the area of nanotechnology. Taking small atoms and building them up into larger structures is absolutely what nanotech does. And so it may be that in the next 5 to 10 years, we make some good progress that finishes this chain off and allows us to understand how we get from small molecules to big molecules. And I want to say now in advance, that doesn't mean that God has got any smaller. What it means is we actually see his creative activity in greater detail.
See the difference? The difference is there's a real danger when we attribute things that we don't understand to God. And then as we discover more, the creator of all things gets smaller. But that isn't the way that I see it either. I agree with this man. I do. I didn't think I was going to stumble across that agreement, but I did.
So in conclusion, nanotechnology, it's the art and science of manipulating material on the nanometer scale. It's on track to form the basis of the next scientific revolution. If handled and communicated properly, it's the potential to be a significant force for good, addressing many of the global challenges that affect both rich and poor. God got there first. Nature is full of nanotechnology, and it really doesn't change the basic relationship between science and God. It's all God's creative activity. We just see it more clearly than we did before. Thank you very much.
And there we have it, guys. Comments, questions, interrogatories?
Like Star Wars and Metachlorian. Did I say it, TMC?
I think that sounds right. Midichlorian.
Metachlorians, yeah, Vorse.
Yeah, man. It's
Closing comments, gentlemen, and everybody out in the chat. It's good to see you all out there. I see every face, every person, all the comments. I've read them. Thank you all for being here with us. Very much appreciated. Please spread the word. We don't do this because it kind of is fun, but it's also for a purpose. You know, there is a passion that we have to bring knowledge and information and some sort of a working understanding of how our world is changing to us. Because it could be very good, it could be very bad. It's most likely going to wind up somewhere in the middle, but it's going to be more toward the good the more that we know. You guys just take us, close us out for the show here. You get the last words, both of you. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, I just want to
say thank you for inviting me tonight. I think there's some practical applications here in our day-to-day functions that if we sit back and look at it, would apply and get us to maybe think about that a little deeper. Thank you.
Yeah.
TMC?
There's so much more to nanotech than what we looked at today. It's mind-numbing, but this is our medical future. It's this synergy between the nanoscale and energy-based medicine. This is a critical piece of nanotech, whether it be synthetic or biologic, meaning genetic. It all ties together, and I don't know, more as time permits. But that's all for today, folks. So good night or good day, wherever you are.